Sometimes keeping it simple is best, and nothing is more simple than a turn-based strategy game without strategy. Perhaps that's being a little harsh on Warhammer Quest 2, but it's not being inaccurate. The concept is incredibly simple. You go into dungeons, you open rooms which have enemies, you kill those enemies, and then you loot 3 items and or people, which are seemingly completely random. On my first optional dungeon, I got a beast of a greatsword that was several levels higher than my party, and decked in magical items that would have taken me half a dozen or more dungeons to buy. For beating the entire first chapter, the final dungeon gave me junk. There is some degree of reward for doing optional dungeons that pop up frequently. They'll tell you one of the items you get for doing them, and the ones labeled hard tend to have far better items listed than the easy ones, and also do live up to the promise of being harder. The difficulty absolutely goes up as you take on harder missions or go deeper in the story. Enemies with more health, abilities, and damage become more common, as well as having more weapon resistances. The system regarding resistances is fairly simple. Every weapon is piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning, and armor or monsters reduce some of that damage. Every attack is one of those types, including magic, but there are some items or weapons that permit you to ignore damage resistance that are extremely valuable when going into a cave full of monsters that make 90% reduced damage from piercing weapons, was making my archer useless for most of the dungeon. There are status effects like burning, which deals periodic damage and is extremely deadly early on when beastmen with torches can take your tank to half health with a single attack, and freezing, which basically stuns an enemy and is the closest thing to using strategy the game has beyond just dishing out damage and using choke points. That is pretty much the entire game in a nutshell. You gear up your heroes slowly, you get tough enemies to go to chokes or freeze them, and you dish out damage. You're fairly limited in what you can bring since weapons, armor, shields all take up inventory slots. You only start with 4 slots, and the rest can go to passive effects, spells, or consumables. It is nice that consumables aren't consumed. If you get a potion, for example, it says 3 uses, but that is per dungeon, not in total. So don't worry about having to keep rebuying those, and definitely use them to their full value each dungeon. As a mobile game ported, I think this ends up being a good time waster. The music and sound is fine, creating good ambience, and the impact behind attacks feels really good. The mace especially sounds like a shotgun going off, and destroying an enemy with one feels satisfying. It will feel grindy, and like you're doing almost the same thing all the time. There's an average selection of map looks and different monsters to kill. It is at its base a very average game, however it is an average game done well. I only ran across one bug in the substantial time I played, which was when my Breton knight, who has Repoussé, which lets him counterattacks, was stunned by the freezing effect, was attacked while frozen, yet procced the Repoussé. The game didn't know how to continue. Stuck thinking the guy needs to counter, but can't, and it just sat there for several minutes before I turned it off. Ironically, the freezing effect can freeze the actual game itself. Luckily, it saves after every turn, so I just reset. Top tip if you give it a try, you can switch characters with shoulder buttons, and you can move them while others are moving. Since between rooms you have to move each character individually, that can be one of the most annoying and tedious parts of the game, just getting everyone to the next door by moving them manually. So doing them all at the same time makes it feel much faster. Overall, it's a very basic game, but that's what they're going for. It's gritty, a bit ugly, but it feels Warhammer and it looks fine from the top-down view, though when you go into the menu the character models are pretty hideous. I've seen better in PS2 games. If you want a simple time waster that does it well, then this is a good game to pick up cheap, and I'm giving it a 6 out of 10.
Hey, did you like that video? If you did, be sure to let us know by clicking the like button and leaving a comment. If you want to be first in line for any new content, be sure to subscribe to our channel and then hit up our Facebook page. The link's in the description below to see what's coming up next.